trick or treason today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy it. Flo, short for Florence, was my wife. I'm Jim. We met in college and got married shortly after graduation. We lived the typical life of husband and wife. We had children, a house and a mortgage. Flo was a stay-at-home mom until the children moved out, and then she resumed her career in real estate. Flo is a charming woman, and I'm sure she gets harassed at work sometimes, but as far as I know, she has stayed loyal to me in our marriage. She has a racy sense of humor sometimes, and I think that's what ultimately got our marriage into trouble. We had 2 children, a boy named Eric and a girl named Patty. At the time this happened, Eric was 21 years old and had graduated from a vocational school after high school. He had his own apartment nearby and worked as an electrician. Patty was 19 years old and a sophomore at a state university about 150 miles away. In the absence of children, we looked forward to a happy retirement in the future with time to travel and hopefully grandchildren to cherish. Our married life was what I thought was normal. We had a loving relationship that was honed and developed throughout our married years. When we first got married, we were intimate almost every night and during the day on weekends. Over time, we began to do this 2 or 3 times a week, and that was enough to make me lose the desire. I thought the same thing was happening to Flo. Over the years, I've learned to press all the necessary buttons to bring her to her peak. Almost every situation has a fly in the ointment, and ours appeared in the form of a new neighbor, Roger, and his wife Alice, who moved next door about 5 years ago. We became friends. The problem with Roger was that he was a prankster and loved to play tricks on everyone he was associated with, and much to my dismay, I was one of his favorite targets. Also, what bothered me even more was that Flo enjoyed his tricks, especially if I was on the receiving end. I tried to tell her that I didn't appreciate his jokes or her enjoyment of them, but she did not listen and did not back down. Over time, I realized that Roger was attracted to Flo, and I think he was preoccupied with thoughts of getting into her pants whenever we were together. He and Flo would laugh together at his sometimes lewd jokes, while Alice and I would just smile politely at their antics when we were out in public. I knew Alice was just as distressed as I was about some of the things they were doing. I remember one day on the beach, Roger was mocking some people on a passing boat, and to my horror, Flo joined in. Alice and I were appalled by their carelessness and scolded them to no avail as they laughed hysterically together. Just before the end, I began to suspect that things were getting out of control. We were at Roger and Alice's house, and Alice and I sat in the backyard while Flo followed Roger into the house to help bring out the drinks. Alice and I talked for a while until we realized that Flo and Roger had been gone for quite some time, so we went inside to look for them. When we entered the kitchen, we found it empty, but as soon as we started searching, they came out of the living room hugging each other, giggling and laughing. Roger had lipstick on his collar and around his mouth, while Flo's lipstick appeared smeared and her hair was disheveled. Alice and I just stood there in shock with our mouths open. "Oh, hi guys, sorry we're late with the drinks, but I had to show Flo my prints," Roger spoke, seemingly oblivious to their appearance. Alice and I continued to stand there, still stunned by their obvious brazen audacity. "Roger possesses some splendid engravings. You know what I'm referring to, don't you?" Alice Flo remarked with a smirk. By then, I had collected my thoughts and finally voiced out. "What on earth is happening?" I inquired of Flo. "How does Roger have lipstick on his face and clothes, and why do you appear as though you've been kissed?" "Oh, that's because I was thrilled to see Roger's engravings. I must have gone a bit overboard." "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, attempting to maintain a serene look on her face. I began to grasp what was occurring when I observed their expressions. Roger wore that sly grin he gets when he cracks one of his jokes, and Flo turned away so I couldn't see how hard she was trying to suppress her laughter. I felt my irritation rise. Alice hadn't caught on to what was happening when she abruptly spoke up. "What on earth is happening, Roger? If you think you're going to carry on with another woman in my home, you might want to think again." When Roger and Flo suddenly burst into loud laughter, I think Alice finally realized what was happening and sheepishly smiled. However, I lost my temper at them. "One of these days, you two will take things too far, and it will end very badly." "Oh, relax, dear. It's just a prank. If you could see the looks on your faces, you'd find it hilarious too," Flo explained to me, still chuckling. "Come on, let's have a drink, and we can laugh about this together," Roger suggested, heading to the kitchen, followed by Flo, who was still laughing. Alice and I just shrugged and trailed behind them, shaking our heads in disapproval. "One day, Alice, they will push it too far. I foresee it. One of these times, one of their pranks will misfire and someone will get hurt, I predicted. Alice concurred with me as we returned to our home that evening. I think Flo sensed I was still upset, particularly about her role in the stunt. Darling, I'm truly sorry, she confessed. I sometimes get too involved. Nothing really happened. I just smeared some lipstick on his face and collar and messed up his hair. We never imagined you guys would get upset. We were on the verge of cancelling the whole thing when you and Alice finally arrived. Are you still upset with me? It was merely a prank. I'm trying to stay calm, Flo, but you need to refrain from participating in Roger's tricks. I nearly had a heart attack when I saw you looking as if you were kissing him. You know how I feel about fidelity. I know, dear. I feel the same and would never intentionally hurt you. Please, remember this, okay? Kiss me firmly and tell me that you forgive me. A few weeks later, we were invited again to Roger and Alice's for dinner on Saturday night, but just as we finished eating, a call came through for Alice. Alice worked at a local hospital as an emergency room nurse. After hanging up, he turned to Alice. It's the emergency room. There's been a severe car accident and multiple people are injured. They need you to come immediately. Oh no, I'll change and head out, Alice responded. 10 minutes later, Alice was en route to the hospital. After she departed, Roger turned to me and asked if I would assist him with a project in his basement while I was there. Flo was quiet all this while, turning away from me. I hadn't thought much of it at that moment, but then he stated, "Certainly, what can I help with?" I asked, standing up to follow him into the basement. "I need you to hold something for me while I fasten it to the ceiling. It's not overly heavy, but I can't hold it up and secure it simultaneously, and Alice is too short to hold it." Okay, it seems straightforward. Trust me, it is, and it will only take a minute. As we descended the stairs, he led me to a metal support post that had been installed next to the stove on the floor above. He retrieved a small metal box with a power cord dangling from it from his workbench and raised it to the ceiling between the support column and the furnace. I noticed that Flo had followed us down and was watching us with a grin on her face. Once again, I didn't pay much attention to her presence or her peculiar smile. "Now, I need you to hold this here while I attach it," Roger directed me. "What on earth is this?" I asked, lifting my hands to support the box since Roger was positioned between the pipe and the furnace. I needed to curve my arms around the pipe to push it against the basement ceiling. "I'll explain in a moment, but first I need to get my tools," he said, and vanished behind his desk, leaving me clutching the box. He returned almost immediately, and I didn't notice what he held in his hand until I heard 2 sharp snaps as something solid and metallic clamped around my wrists. Suddenly I understood that I had been deceived, and I was handcuffed to the pipe. I swiveled my head in astonishment to see Roger approach Flo and place his arm around her waist as they stood there observing me. My mind was in chaos, but I managed to utter, "What on earth is happening, Roger? Remove these cursed handcuffs now." "Well, pal, you know I can't do that." Flo mentioned she adored my prints so much that she wishes to see them again, but this time we don't want you or Alice here to observe, he said, as he and Flo turned and walked back up the basement stairs. Flo walked, swaying her hips noticeably. "Let me go, damn it. You're crossing the line this time, Roger, and you'll regret it if you don't release me right now." "Just relax a bit, dear. I just want to view some prints," Flo remarked as they vanished from sight, chuckling and laughing. Meanwhile, I struggled with the handcuffs, trying to determine if there was any way to liberate myself. I realized the futility of my predicament. The pipe was secured in the concrete below and fastened to a steel I-beam above. Listening, I could hear them move into the master bedroom directly above, and I heard Flo chuckle with excitement. Footsteps trod on the carpet above, and I heard, "Hurry up and take off those panties," to which Flo responded, "I desire you so much." My fury intensified each minute as I continued my desperate fight with the handcuffs. I heard the bed creak above me and imagined them enjoying a night together. I cursed the handcuffs and my unfaithful spouse above. My wrists were sore and bleeding as I continued to pull and twist in the handcuffs. My emotions swirled as I heard Roger groan and Flo utter rhythmic sounds. Then silence fell upstairs for a few moments. I ceased struggling and simply lay on the hard concrete floor, my hands still encircling the pipe. A profound sadness overwhelmed me when I eventually heard Flo exclaim, "Oh, that was wonderful, Roger. Someday I must see your prints again. I guess we should dress and go downstairs to check on Jim," Roger suggested. "Okay, Flo, I need to rest for a moment, but Alice should be returning soon from that fake call I made, and I don't want her to find me in bed with you," he added. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the basement stairs, but I didn't look up as they approached where I was lying. "Oh hell," I heard Roger mutter, seeing his wrists all bloody. "Honey, it was just a joke, nothing happened," Flo exclaimed. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Hurry up, Roger, unlock the cuffs so we can bandage his wrists." Oh God, I never imagined he would take it so personally," she continued. I looked up at them, tears streaming down my face, as Roger clumsily fumbled with the key in the handcuff. "Roger, you better hand Flo this key before you unlock me, and then run when I'm free. I'll make you regret the day you were born," I warned. Roger gazed at me silently and handed the key to Flo. He then started towards the stairs, looking at me fearfully as Flo began to unlock the handcuffs. When she finally removed them, I heard Roger's truck start and the tires screech as he drove away. Standing, I looked down at Flo, still crouched on the floor, a look of terror in her eyes. "You better find somewhere else to stay tonight, or I could cause you serious harm, and you better call before you try to come home," I threatened. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. This was just a joke, we didn't do anything," Flo pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Flo, I never want to hear that absurdity about it being a joke ever again. To me, my impression is that you did it, and that's all that matters now. From this moment, I will behave as though you were unfaithful and betrayed me. You can expect a call from my attorney. In a few days we're finished," I declared, turning and heading up the stairs. "No, Jim, please. Nothing happened." She cried out from the basement. "What will I tell the children?" I didn't respond and continued towards the front door. Just as I was getting into my car, an extremely upset Alice pulled into their driveway. "Where the heck is my lousy husband? There was no accident, and I didn't need an ambulance," she declared as she exited the car. Suddenly, she noticed my wrists. "What happened, Jim?" "Dear God, look at your wrists. Let me bandage them for you." Roger and Flo came up with another prank, Alice. This time they went too far. "I'm divorcing Flo," I explained. "Dear God, what did they do?" You can hear it from Flo and Roger. "I'm heading home and will take care of the dressing myself when I get there. You can tell my unfaithful ex-wife that she will find her clothes and belongings on the porch if she wants to get into our house again." "She better get a legal order," Alice said, distressed as she hurriedly entered the house. I got into the car and drove home, still sweating inside. When I got home, I washed my wrists thoroughly with germ-killing soap, applied antibacterial ointment, and bandaged them as well as I could. I then methodically began packing Flo's washcloths, makeup, and other personal items into plastic trash bags and placing them on the porch. The phone rang while I was working, but I refused to answer it or even check the caller ID. When I finished, I locked the door, undressed, and lay down on the bed. Although I was emotionally and physically drained, I couldn't sleep for a long time. When I woke up in the morning, the phone rang again, but I refused to pick up the call. I got up, took a shower, and had breakfast. Then I replaced the bandages on my wrists around 10. The doorbell rang, and I looked out to see Alice standing in the doorway. Opening it, I motioned for her to come inside. "Well, they really did it this time, didn't they?" she said as she entered. "I'm afraid so. What are you going to do?" I asked. Like I told her, I'm divorcing her, but they say nothing happened. It was just one of their pranks. Flo desperately wants to talk to you. My impression is that they did it, and as far as I'm concerned, that is reality. I will schedule an appointment with a divorce attorney first thing Monday morning, I told her calmly. "You're really angry, aren't you? Can't you wait until you cool down before you decide to do something so drastic? You've been committed to each other for almost 24 years. Do you want to give it up without trying to save anything? I will not let you betray me. I've told Flo this many times, and as far as I'm concerned, she betrayed me, and now it's over." But they claimed that nothing happened. They just made sounds as if it really happened. I don't know if this happened, these are just their words. It was as if it could happen, and they have no way of proving that it didn't happen, so I have to agree with my impression that this actually happened. She had no respect for me at all. Can't you leave everything as it is and go to a consultation? Flo was just terribly upset over this last time. I warned her about such things, but she didn't listen. I'm done talking. We'll just let the lawyer sort it out. If you're happy with Roger's role in this, then you can continue to live with him, but don't count on me. Just tell Roger that he better stay away from me in the future. I haven't decided what to do with Roger yet, but I really hate to see you guys break up over this. Roger is very remorseful about all this and wants me to convey his sincere apologies to you. Make sure he understands that our friendship is over. As much as I'd like to remain friends with you, Alice, I think it would be best if we didn't date again while you stayed with him. Is there anything I can tell Flo that might give her some hope that you will forgive her if she can prove to me that she didn't have a night with Roger? I'll consider it, and I won't just take Roger or her word for it that nothing happened and it was merely a joke. I suspect it occurred, and that's the reason it happened. All right, Jim, I'll inform her. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, Alice. Now let me pack her belongings into your car so you can deliver them to her. I assume you still have it. She is relocating to her sister's place this afternoon. Her sister resides on the other side of town. She was a widow and lived alone, so there would be space for Flo, possibly. Indefinitely. After packing Flo's luggage into Alice's car, I waved to her as she departed, then went back to my home. The first task I did was search for a locksmith's number to alter the locks on my home. I suddenly realized that if I departed for work on Monday and Flo returned to the house and changed the locks, I would end up on the street. I decided on new locks that same day and then unplugged my phone and turned off my cell phone. I spent the entire day working around the house until the locksmith came. After he left, I drove to the local supermarket where I purchased a few frozen meals to sustain me for a week or so, and then returned to my solitary home. I truly missed Flo after nearly 24 years together, but I couldn't dismiss my anger at her and what she and Roger had done to me. That evening around 7:30, I was watching TV when the doorbell rang. Peering out the window, I saw Flo's sister, Mary, standing at the front door. "Hello, Mary," was my greeting as I opened the door to let her in. "Hello, Jim. Can I have a few minutes of your time?" "Of course," I replied as we walked into the living room. She sat down and I took a seat in the chair and asked if she wanted something to drink. "Coca-Cola would be quite sufficient," she replied. I fetched one for her and one for myself and returned to the living room. I presume you know why she began, taking a sip of her beverage. "Yes, are you going to ask me to take her back? If so, you came in vain." "No," she replied. She told me everything about it. "How are your wrists? They're healing now, and everything should be fine. I see no signs of infection. Flo will be relieved to hear that. You know she's almost at her breaking point, especially since you refused to speak with her, and that's why I'm here to relay a message, more than one message, actually. I will listen to your messages, but I can't promise anything in return. First off, she loves you very much and is deeply regretful for what she did. Anything else, she wants you to know that she's prepared to undergo a lie detector test to verify that she's truthful when she claims nothing happened with Roger or anyone else. This is the only evidence she can provide." This was a novel idea I hadn't considered, and I mulled it over for a few minutes while Mary continued to sip her Coke. It seems fair to me, but I need to set some conditions first. Results proving she didn't get intimate with Roger don't guarantee I'll take her back. Secondly, Roger must also take the same test, and his results must align with hers. Third, I require the approval of whoever administers the tests and questions. And fourth, I will not finance the tests. That seems reasonable, Jim, but couldn't you be more open to taking her back if the test results prove they're truthful? No, she wounded me deeply. And even if I bring her back, it will take a long time before I can forgive her. Okay, Jim, I'll convey your conditions. I truly regret this. I intended to be angry at her for her foolishness when she arrived this afternoon, but she was such a pitiful sight that I don't think anything I could say would make her feel any worse. She recognizes she did something very foolish and also hurt you immensely. I'll need to administer some medication to help her rest tonight. Additionally, I want to mention that she reached out to your kids and disclosed her actions. I believe they were slightly displeased with her because she hasn't ceased sobbing since she spoke with them. Well, I should return and convey your message. Thanks for the soda. Okay, Mary, thanks for making the trip here. I value your care. After she departed, I took a moment to reflect on the circumstances. Some of my initial resentment had subsided somewhat, allowing me to ponder more lucidly about my desires. I opted to serve myself a half glass of scotch and then headed to the kitchen to add an ice cube, not returning to my seat. I roamed around the house, observing all the items that symbolized our married life together. Did I genuinely wish to terminate this? My contemplations and recollections were interrupted by the doorbell. Peering through the window, I noticed our daughter Patty standing at the front door, visibly distressed. Oh, I realized she had just found out that the locks were changed and her key was ineffective. Upon opening the door, Patty entered abruptly, giving me a resentful gaze. What's with the locks, Dad? And why haven't you been answering the calls? I had to drive 150 miles to figure out what was happening. Sorry, Patty, I didn't mean to avoid speaking to your mother. I heard from your Aunt Mary that she informed you about her actions. Yeah, and I'm very upset with you for evicting her just over a prank. Can't you forgive her and allow her back home? When she phoned me to confess her deeds, I realized she had acted foolishly, Patty. It was more than merely a prank, and I had previously cautioned her that I disapproved of how she and our friend Roger continued their jests. But she ignored me. I couldn't extract much from my mom over the phone, but I get that it was supposedly just a prank. What was so terrible about that Patty persisted. I began by explaining the lipstick smear trick they had previously executed. In our following discussions, I then disclosed the prank, rolled up my sleeves, and showed her the marks on my wrists. "Oh, Daddy, this is dreadful. Was that when you expelled her?" "Yes, they might have been intimate. It truly seemed that way from what they said, because I recognized the sounds your mum makes in the bedroom, or they are exceptional actors. I acknowledge that this happened. And this is my reality until she can demonstrate otherwise. I requested your mother undergo a lie detector test and asked Roger to do the same. If the test results confirm their story, I will have to believe her." However, it pained me deeply that she thought I would tolerate being perceived as weak and mocked and would laugh at their so-called prank. I may still be unable to reconcile with her. I'm truly sorry about all this, Dad. I hope you and Mum can resolve this because I love you both despite what she did. I'm trying to make it work, baby, because I deeply miss your mom, but I can't get past her disrespect towards me, okay, Daddy? I guess I can't expect more now that I understand what transpired. I'm heading to see my mum to try and soothe her. I'll likely stay the night at Aunt Mary's since I have to return to school tomorrow. Please activate your phone so I can reach you, and I know Eric wants to speak with you too. He's at that job upstate and has been attempting to call you after your mum contacted him. Okay, baby, I'll reactivate the phones as soon as you depart. Give me a hug. I embraced her and held her close to me. She resembled her mother so much it was sometimes unsettling, and I cherished her dearly. Farewell, Daddy, she said to me, opening her car door. I waved to her as she drove out of the driveway and up the street. Then I returned to my lone drink, turning my phones back on. A couple of days after Flo's sister, Mary, visited me, she phoned me and informed me that Flo had consented to my conditions for the polygraph test, and she had also convinced Roger to consent as well. Roger agreed to finance his own test to demonstrate his regret for his involvement in the practical joke. Mary also provided me with the name and contact number of the polygraph examiner. My irritation with Flo for participating in the prank had diminished slightly, but I was still feeling very downcast. If she loved me and had not spent a night with Roger, how could she participate in such a demeaning prank on me? I was gradually accepting the possibility that her affection for me had faded, despite her assertions that she wanted to reconcile. It might ultimately boil down to deciding whether I want a loveless marriage if tests proved there was no affair. Flo attempted to contact me several times, but I disconnected the call as soon as I heard her voice. Afterward, all her messages to me were conveyed through her sister, and I received daily calls mostly about how remorseful Flo was and her wish to return home, yet I kept responding that I would not make a decision until the polygraph tests were completed. Around this time, our son Eric began to contact me, pleading for me to pardon his mother and allow her to return. I attempted to clarify what had occurred and why his mother's actions had hurt me so deeply, but he failed to grasp my anguish and persisted in urging me to let her come back. I realized that I might end up in a prearranged relationship with my son if it turned out we were divorced. It was somewhat comforting to know that our daughter Patty was more comprehending and supportive of my situation. After receiving details from Mary about the polygraph examiner's name, I contacted several professionals in legal and law enforcement fields and confirmed that this individual was frequently employed by the police. I was assured he would administer a fair test. I phoned and scheduled an appointment with him for the following day. I discovered that he had already been approached by Flo and Roger and had arranged a test for each of them in 2 days. They both had named me as an interested party with the authority to determine the questions to be asked. The next day, I informed my boss that I needed some personal time off and traveled to the polygraph examiner's office. His name was Jack Heron, and I explained to him the issue and my need to resolve it by testing Flo and Roger to find out whether they were involved intimately or not. We discussed the questions he would pose, and he assured me he would query both Flo and Roger identically, collate the responses, and provide me with a conclusive written report. He agreed that if the test results for both aligned, it would confirm that an affair had not taken place. If this had not been the case, I probably would never have been able to trust her again, and divorce would have been inevitable. If the test indicated that they were both deceitful, I could initiate divorce proceedings right away. As far as I could see, it wasn't arduous. I returned to work feeling more assured that I would soon ascertain whether infidelity was involved. However, deep down, I was aware that challenging decisions awaited me. For the next 3 days, I attended work as usual and stayed late to avoid returning to an unoccupied home. I would dine at a nearby diner, and when I got home I would consume whiskey and then lie down in my vacant bed. Falling asleep was hard. I truly missed Flo and the affection and warmth she contributed to our marriage before the prank began. On the morning of the test, I felt uncertain. All it required was a clear polygraph test report, and I would embrace Flo back home with the assurance that after my reaction to their last prank, I would never be the target of any foolish jokes again. This sensation persisted until the phone rang just after 11. It was Alice. "Jim, this is Alice. I discovered something you really need to see. Roger is at the testing center. Can you come right now?" The tone of her voice was ominous, so I swiftly made my way to the neighboring house, as is our tradition. I entered directly through the front door and heard Alice shout that she was in the office. Entering, I noticed her seated at her desktop computer, a look of concern on her face. "Jim, I need you to see this," she stated. I moved my chair nearer. Roger has been quite secretive since Tuesday. A few times I passed by this door, and he quickly minimized something on his screen. Moreover, he often exits the room when he is on a call. Yesterday, I'm quite certain he spoke to Flo on the phone. Today, I finally got a chance to look into our computer without him around. With that, Alice clicked on the Google icon at the bottom of the screen, launching the application. I'm not sure if Roger knows that unless you erase them, all Google searches are stored. This is the record of his searches since Tuesday. My heart sank as I read some of the topics he had explored. There were 4 different methods on the subject of how to cheat a lie detector test. Alice and I spent the next 30 minutes viewing many of the pages Roger had been viewing. After we had seen enough, we moved to the living room to ponder the implications of our findings. We were still discussing when we heard Roger's car arrive. Soon after, he came through the front door, gave me a tired nod, then walked over to the sofa opposite Alice and me and sat down. Had I not been observant, I might have missed the faint limp as he favored his left leg. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Raj, I believe you've aced the test," I remarked. Honestly, I had doubted that anything significant had occurred that day. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Alice's confused glance. Roger returned before I could explain my suspicions to her. "If you promise that you and Flo will never attempt another stunt as long as you live, I'm ready to come over, shake your hand, and let bygones be bygones. Heck, I probably won't even check the report." His expression brightened considerably, and he quickly promised he would abide. Smiling, I stood and approached him. As he slowly rose to meet me, extending his hand, I stepped firmly onto his right leg. Such an action should have caused him mild pain. Instead, his face paled and he let out a shriek, hurling himself back onto the couch. In desperation, he used both hands to free his foot from under mine before tearing off his shoe. Alice and I observed as he removed the shoe, revealing blood seeping from his sock. He continued to grimace. A sideways look at Alice showed she was mortified by the sight. I watched her expression change as she realized the connection between our earlier reading and the injury on Roger's leg. "I won't bother with the report because I already know it's all fabricated," I declared. "Did that nail you hammered into your shoe, pressing it while they asked you security questions, help mask your deception? It was bound to occur, didn't it? Make yourself perspire, elevate your heart rate with harmless inquiries so that when you tell them, the results don't seem fraudulent." Roger's pain slightly diminished, replaced by a look of resignation as he turned from me to Alice. "Yes, I did cheat and I showed Flo how, but not for the reasons you think. Seriously, listen, Alice, this is important." Alice and I sat back down, and Roger gently pressed on his foot to stem the bleeding. I glanced at Alice and noticed her frown at the mess he had created on the carpet. I contemplated suggesting that she make him clean the carpet with his tongue. To his credit, Roger didn't seem to think of anything to say to promote this new development. We didn't know what questions you had asked the guy. What's so complicated about the question? Did you two believe in him? I interrupted him. Yes, I know we both would have passed this with flying colors, but we were worried that you would slip into something more subtle. For instance, well, has our behavior always been such that it passes the test for marriage at this point? Alice angrily intervened in the conversation, and the answer to that question obviously was a resounding no. Why else would you bother inserting a damn nail into your shoe before the test? I'm assuming the fact that you arrived with the nail still inside means you forgot to bring spare shoes or a set of pliers. You've never been very skilled at planning ahead, have you? Please, honey, I didn't want to lose you, and Flo certainly didn't want to lose Jim. So, my dear husband, When and what did you do that would not pass the test for marriage? Roger shifted in his seat and replied in a very quiet voice, "It was that day we wanted to just pretend we were busy upstairs. We were just jumping on the bed. As you can imagine, we were both fully clothed," he quickly added. "We were jumping up and down, making the bed squeak, and I don't even remember who started it, but somehow we started caressing each other through our clothes. We both really enjoyed it. We were so foolish I was a bit puzzled." I'm a good judge of character, and this rings true if that weren't the case. Roger was extremely adept at concocting excuses on the spot. I looked at Alice. "Is this satisfactory for you?" "No way. This couple has demonstrated that they are such accomplished liars and manipulators that I'm far from convinced." "Roger, put some antiseptic on your leg, bandage it, and then I think you should leave. I have something to ponder, not to mention cleaning up another one of your splendid messes." Alice snapped, pointing to a stain on the carpet near Roger's foot. If Roger wasn't a superb actor, the look of terror on his face showed that he was deeply concerned about the future of his marriage. He blurted out, "I have a video." Alice almost simultaneously. My question popped up, "Which video?" We sounded like a deranged version of two people singing in harmony. I installed a video camera in our bedroom before we handcuffed you in the basement. I recorded it all. I beat Alice to the punch. "Then why on earth didn't you mention this a few days ago?" Roger didn't need to answer that question. If the video showed them caressing each other, even while fully clothed, it wouldn't be something two spouses desperate to reconcile with their partners would want to disclose. I, for one, firmly believe that the boundary of infidelity extends far beyond actual physical actions. Any form of closeness, even a kiss on the lips, would be overstepping the boundary of what is allowed. I wanted to, but Flo thought you'd freak out. We told Roger to bandage his leg and then showed us the video while he was out of the room. I sent Flo a message. I couldn't resist driving a nail into her coffin of fear. Take the nail out of your shoe and come to Alice's house. Roger is going to show us a video. Usually, it's about a minute's walk from Mary's house to ours, but it took a good 35 minutes before there was a knock on the door. Alice opened it and let in Flo and her sister Mary. Flo's makeup was smeared, and her eyes were red. Mary explained that my wife panicked as soon as she read my message and realized that I had caught her playing games. Flo didn't look nearly as composed about the test results as Roger did when he first came home. Mary simply looked at me and raised her eyebrows at Flo's further self-destructive behavior. Flo tried to hug me, but I seated her down on the couch next to me. She continued to gaze at my face, presumably to discern my emotions. I wondered if Mary had any clue about the contents of the video. Alice and I remained engaged throughout those 35 minutes. Our discussion focused on our likely actions if the video confirmed Roger's claims. Alice had resolved that she would eventually forgive Roger for the chaos in the bedroom, but only after letting him ponder his actions for some time. My feelings were mixed emotionally. I felt betrayed by my wife, which I had always deemed unforgivable. Yet, logically, I was more composed. Flo had been an exemplary spouse for 24 years, and our children had expressed that they would be heartbroken if I chose not to forgive her. Once everyone was settled, Roger approached with his laptop, a USB flash drive protruding from one port and a cable from another. He placed the laptop next to the TV and powered it on. I found it odd that he didn't insert the flash drive directly into the TV, but then I recalled Alice mentioning his lack of tech skills. When the laptop screen mirrored the TV, Roger issued another apology and pressed play. Flo avoided eye contact with everyone, including the TV. She understood my views on loyalty, making this an incredibly difficult moment for her. Mary watched the screen intently, seemingly unaware of what was about to unfold. Roger, appearing calmer, sat next to Alice and reached for her hand, but she withdrew it. The video, lasting only about 10 minutes, depicted exactly what Roger had described. It was visually unappealing. Shortly after starting, both main actors were fully clothed, as Roger had indicated. He flipped over, then was straddled by the other, who faced the camera and repeated the exact words I recalled from when I was restrained in the basement. Watching this was challenging for me for multiple reasons. Firstly, no self-respecting man, unless delusionally accepting, wants to see his wife with another man in such a scenario. Secondly, it reignited severe PTSD, echoing the words that had shattered me days earlier, causing my wrists to ache with memories of my powerlessness. Midway through, I shut my eyes, attempting to block out the sounds. I didn't reopen them until the quiet following their simultaneous peaks enveloped the room. This silence felt overwhelmingly loud and pervasive. Even normal breathing was inaudible. I wasn't alone in my turmoil. I glanced at the screen to see Flo and Roger quickly part ways before exiting the camera's view. The still screen displayed an empty bed. The silence in the room stretched for several awkward seconds after the video ended. Mary stared at Flo with revulsion. Roger looked at Alice with hope, and Flo focused on a distant corner of the floor. The silence was shattered when Alice stood abruptly, followed quickly by Roger. "You're a scoundrel, a despicable traitor." The petite nurse's words were shocking. The harshest I'd ever heard from her before were mild curses. Roger, clearly stunned, received a slap so loud it resembled a gunshot. He recoiled, avoiding a second strike, and appeared bewildered. This whole video is a fabrication. But why? We had invited Jim and Flo over for the evening, planning to relax on the patio, right? But we ended up indoors because it had been raining all day, remember? Alice's tone was more of a snarl than a question. Roger, still perplexed, nodded, seemingly recalling the events as Alice described. Alice gestured towards the TV screen in frustration, saying, "Look at this fool. Sunlight is streaming through the window. This was recorded not only on a sunny day but also in the morning. This window doesn't get direct sunlight until noon. You made up the entire story, didn't you?" Roger's face shifted from a puzzled look to a look of terror. That was all I needed to confirm their guilt. The abrupt mental transition from thinking about forgiveness to an unrepentant decision was baffling, and I despise being humiliated. I could, in fact, concede that there might be a valid reason for falsifying a lie detector test. There was only one reason: they tampered with the video. The next few moments were extremely tense. Flo yelled loudly and dashed out the door. Mary just sat there, shocked. Alice advanced towards Roger, who attempted to get past me, using me as a barrier. I stepped forward, and with all my might, I stomped on his sore leg. Instinctively, he bent over when his head reached almost level with my knee, which was moving in the opposite direction. His head snapped back up as blood gushed from his flattened nose. He joined Flo in a hasty escape from the house. The three of us were caught in a dreadful scene. Alice stood shaking, tears rolling down her cheeks. I understood exactly how she felt. For the second time in a week, the man I had adored unconditionally for nearly 25 years ripped my heart apart. Knowing that this was the same person who sustained my hope during tough times was even more shocking. Mary continued to sit and stare at the TV screen, presumably stunned by her sister's foolishness, and if I might add, appalled by the lies Flo undoubtedly shared with her over the past week. I approached Alice and embraced her, holding her as she shook uncontrollably from the end of her marriage. I always preferred to mourn privately. I would do so later. Here and now, I remained composed and clinically calm, as one must be in a crisis, and had already started to formulate a list of questions and lines of inquiry. I was beginning to regret allowing Roger to leave with only a broken nose. I glanced at Mary, wondering why she remained. Was it to apologize for her role in all this once things calmed down? Was it her inability to look away from the disaster unfolding before her, or should we have waited to support her sister again? Unable to answer this without losing contact with Alice, and having no intention of doing so, I let my thoughts race. It was clear that Roger was quite clever, a skilled manipulator, and a convincing actor. If Alice hadn't picked up on the sunlight clue, we might still be part of two happy couples. Reflecting on it, the altered video was cleverly done. I still struggled to reconcile this with the fact that I was faking it. I would bet my life that the audio matched the words I heard that weekend. The inevitable logical conclusion that this certainty brought fit perfectly into that same slot in my mind, like the second to last piece of a puzzle. They either overlaid the old audio on new visual footage or replicated the words and sounds in real time. Both versions were based on their actions during the initial event. Suddenly, Roger's act of playing the file through his laptop made sense. I hugged Alice one last time, seated her on the sofa, and walked over to my laptop. Thankfully, it hadn't entered sleep mode yet, which would have required a password to regain access. Silly, I thought to myself. If that were the case, I could just view the flash drive on another device. Clearly, my mind was also clouded with everything that had transpired. With my fingers swiftly navigating the keyboard and mouse, I shut down the software that would display the video on the Explorer screen. It informed us that we had just watched and observed. There were also files labeled from 2 to S. 2 additional files stood out from the rest, like mismatched puzzle pieces. One was named Me and Flow Original, and the other was labeled Basement. I double-clicked the latter and moved the progress bar about 3/4 of the way through. There I was, hanging from that bar in the accursed basement, captured by an evidently concealed camera. I closed the clip due to an overflow of unpleasant memories. The file marked original was significantly bulkier than the ones that followed. Looking at Alice and receiving her affirmative nod, I pressed play. It showed Roger in Alice's bedroom. The perspective was different than in video 8, which compelled me to dash down the hallway to that room to compare the two angles. This brief investigative work suggested that the original camera was likely hidden on a bookshelf, while the later recordings were probably taken from a camera placed on a tripod at the foot of the bed. When I returned to the living room, the small counter at the bottom of the screen read 1 minute 5 seconds, with over an hour remaining. Roger clearly lacked editing skills. I fast-forwarded to 20 minutes before the end, then advanced at 30-second intervals until the action unfolded. Going back half a minute, I sat down on the couch next to Alice and clasped her hand for mutual support. Let's just say the original version was quite distinct from the later ones. The only similarity was that each began with Flo pushing Roger onto his back. About 25 seconds later, I heard Alice and Mary inhale sharply due to the angle at which the video was shot. Flo's face was visible, as she turned her head to the side and looked down and to the left of the camera, specifically to a grate at floor level that opened into a conduit that transmitted the sounds their prank relied on to the basement below the basement where I was imprisoned. The expression on Flo's face, the one that caused the two women to inhale sharply, was appalling. My wife was fully aware of what was occurring in my mind in the basement that night, and she relished it. My own so-called loving wife found joy in my mental anguish. I suppressed a strong urge to vomit. When Roger noticed where Flo's gaze was directed on the screen, he smirked wickedly. Too stunned to check the time, but several seconds must have elapsed. The rest of the video played out pretty much as I envisioned it would while I was in the basement, armed with the benefit of hindsight. I believe it was Flo's cruel delight in the situation that encouraged Roger and fueled the subsequent events. With that in mind, if I were a betting man, I'd wager this was Roger and Flo's inaugural venture, and the video clearly depicted how what started as a seemingly innocent scenario rapidly escalated. I was quite certain Roger relished observing another being demeaned, but it appeared that Flo had discovered her predilection that day. After the screening concluded, Mary inquired about the potential future between Flo and me. From her expression, she was clearly pessimistic. I paused for at least a minute to sort through my emotions. No, not in this lifetime, Mary. Ironically, if Flo had approached me later and explained that it began as a prank but escalated beyond control as it seemed in the original video, then perhaps I might have considered forgiveness. But no, they schemed to rewrite history and trick the lie detector test a level of deceit I never imagined she possessed. It makes me question how well I truly knew her and what else she might have misled me about. Plus, we haven't yet reviewed all the workout videos after her initial error. She came back and initiated another personal physical interaction with Roger. How often did they find pleasure in each other during those training sessions? And then there was the look on her face. I know you noticed it too. I'm sorry, Mary, but it's over between us. Mary nodded solemnly. Please don't expose her in public, Jim, it would just embarrass your children. If you hand me a copy of the tape, I will gently discuss this with Mum and Dad, Flo, and even your children if needed. I nodded and expressed my gratitude. She departed sorrowfully, yet with a resolute look on her face. Alice had already found the phone directory open to the legal section. Alice and I comforted each other for several weeks, but it was evident that any relationship was destined for painful memories, and we separated as friends. I was leaving her place late one night after once more comforting her intensely when I encountered an enraged Roger in her front yard. How could he possibly hope to reconcile with Alice if I was visiting her 5 times a week? What a delusional fool. Scanning for potential witnesses, I took immense satisfaction in breaking his nose again. I was quite proud of myself. The memory of that cruel smirk on his face just before he destroyed my marriage would have been enough provocation. Alice essentially crucified him in the divorce when he demanded his share of the assets she, with my complete support, threatened that I would accuse him of illegal restraint using the tape of me in the basement as proof. He vanished shortly after. Good. I might have been bluffing, I could have shrugged off the public humiliation myself, and I didn't care about Flo's reputation, but I didn't want to shame my children or Flo's extended family. About a week after the video session, soon after I bloodied Roger's nose, I got a message from Flo asking if my not releasing the tape to her kids, family, and friends meant we might have a future. The fact that she linked to only one clip indicated that she didn't know I had watched the original. She likely thought Roger wouldn't be foolish enough to leave all the evidence on one device. The message also reminded me that I hadn't sent the clips to Mary. I hadn't spoken to my children that week. But considering the self-centered nature of young people, was that a shock? This also suggested that Mary and Flo weren't communicating, possibly because Mary was upset, or maybe because Flo was too ashamed. I called Mary to make sure she was still fine to receive the video. She was fine. It was during that same call that I found out Flo had moved back in with her parents. When I ripped take 8 along with the original on DVD, I remembered I hadn't watched takes 2 through 7. Then I did just that. In between, they transformed every remaining tender or merciful part of my heart into solid stone. To say they both lost control would be putting it mildly. The same repulsed expression was on their faces that had been on her face in the original tape. I almost cancelled the agreement and sent the clip to everyone in Flo's contact list before I calmed down and realized how it would impact my children. I went looking for Roger, but by then he had already left town. No, Flo will not be forgiven, and unfortunately, Roger will not suffer a third broken nose. I sent all the clips to Mary with a note, stating that if I heard from anyone about my ill treatment of Flo, I would release the full video. She must have handled it well because one by one, Flo's parents, Eric and Patty, called to tell me they understood why my marriage ended. I later found out Mary had told them the entire story and offered to show them the clips as proof. Flo's mother was the only one who took her up on her offer, having a hard time believing the story. She apparently got sick halfway through the original clip. After this, Flo did not resist the divorce. Through Mary, I learned that she had escaped the toxic environment of her parents' home by renting a small apartment. I wasn't trying to cheat her in the divorce. 24 good years had to count for something, and I didn't want something to come back and haunt me later for the sake of my children. Flo did send me a sincere letter apologizing for her actions and attempted cover-up. The loneliness she felt was evident from the pages. She pleaded for forgiveness, but only to reconcile with herself. Her pleas for me to forgive her for the sake of her parents, our children, and mutual friends nearly moved me to tears. I wasn't looking for a replacement yet, but there was no lack of single women seeking my attention. Ask any middle-aged woman about the availability of suitable, decent-looking men with good morals, and she will describe a grim scenario. I am looking forward to new encounters with them, and since I am not planning to remarry, I anticipate there will be many such meetings. What do you think of our unusual story today? I think such jokes are too extreme and completely inappropriate. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next videos.